Good morning, everyone, and welcome. So this is actually our first LinkedIn Live, so super excited to have everyone here. So fraud is constantly in the news, but outside of the human element, what controls can and should be put around IT that are usually compromised? So this event will discuss the importance of controls, especially access and identity controls, and how the lack of these controls can result in fraud and other negative scenarios. So first off, we have the panel. Please introduce yourself. I have Kevin Moss.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kevin Moss. I'm a consultant. I have my own consulting firm, Kevin Moss Consulting. I work with fintech and financial service companies in the fraud, lending, and payment space.
Perfect. And Jeffrey Tilton.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm a certified fraud examiner out of New York.
And Cameron May.
Hello, I'm Cameron May, Chief Strategist of Silvereye Technologies. We're a cloud distributor that supports MSPs, MSSPs, and the federal government.
And of course, Garret Grajek.
Greetings. Yes, Garret. I am a CEO of YouAttest and also an identity and access specialist with 13 patents.
Perfect. Thank you all for being here. So let's start with the State of the Union. So Kevin, what is the state of insider threat and financial fraud today?
Well, fraud's been escalating dramatically, whether it be identity theft. FTC was up substantially from 21 to 22, the latest reported years. First-party fraud, where people are who they are, has escalated for merchants, for issuers, for deposit account holders. And so fraud has been a growing problem overall. And insider threats are also a problem. And so as I look at the YouAttest capabilities, my focus, mostly working with startups, it's like a perfect fit for a smaller company with maybe 100, 200 people or less, where it plugs right into Okta and Microsoft, which a lot of the companies use in their operating platforms. And you know, most of the companies that I work with are in the early stages of their operational risk controls, and you know, protecting yourself against people who leave the company or who change jobs, and making sure that people have the right access and control frameworks in place is an important control to prevent against, like, if many fintech firms have downsized because of the funding challenges, and people who leave, or people who might even still be in different jobs, may not have the right mindset around protecting the company. So you have to have blocking and tackling capabilities in place, and YouAttest really brings that to a lot of my clients.
So Jeffrey, would you agree with this, especially in the financial institutions?
Yes, I agree 100%. We all know nowadays that regulatory agencies are all looking for internal controls. Besides the regulatory agencies, even if you don't have a regulatory agency, it's best business practice. You have to know who's in your company, who has access to what they're allowed to do. Unless you do a cleansing, which YouAttest will let you do, get rid of your ghost accounts, get rid of your privilege creep, you can't have segregation of duties, you can't have proper internal controls, and it's going to come back and bite you, either with fines, or you're going to have an insider who's doing fraud, or with the ghost accounts, you're going to have bots trying to get into your accounts and going around and doing mischievous things. You have no choice but to do this on a continuous basis, at least quarterly.
And since we have an MSP expert here, so Cameron, would you add, what is the state of fraud controls, especially around identity for the MSPs?
It's not great. It's just not great. We know we've seen this big evolution. So MSPs are really having a big heyday now. For a long time, it was a lot of these IT advisors and value-added resellers and that sort of thing. But MSP is one of the fastest growing industries in tech. And we're starting to see that when there's more ransomware, even if it's, I'm a CEO of a 100-person company and then one of my colleagues gets hit by ransomware, I'm going to lean on my MSP. The thing is, historically, these MSPs, what they've been doing is break fix, remote assistance, license management. And now they're being pressured by their clients to say, hey, we want more security. We want more security. So we're seeing this big evolution of these MSPs that are growing are taking on more security focused activities such as identity management. And so those are the ones that are growing. And then we're seeing a big consolidation where the big MSSPs already, they're just gobbling up MSPs because they know that they have all of these clients. And as time goes by, and as every single day you see another ransomware, somebody lost their phone and accessed this, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's really what we're seeing in the industry. We're seeing this big consolidation. We're seeing this big push and this big lean on MSPs to expand their portfolio and be the security experts.
So given all this, Kevin, what are the consequences of these varying levels of identity proficiency?
Well, as you know, people with the wrong intent go after the weakest institutions and the weakest links in those companies. And so I think fraud is something that just doesn't go away. It's really about pushing it somewhere else. And so I think, what YouAttest offers is a really simple pricing structure, a really simple process to go in and clean this up for you. And so the bottom line is, if you don't have these controls, you're exposing yourself to the risk of fraud, the risk of insider threats, and outsider threats. And so I look at this as a very basic set of operational controls that every institution, whether you have 50 people or 50,000 people, has to have a really good process in place. And what I would add is, I spent most of my career working for big banks. And what I've seen historically is, and most big banks have very, very good systems that support access control management on a quarterly basis, let's say. But the issue is you have layers and layers of different systems. And what I found was that I could never always understand exactly what systems my direct reports had access to. And so it's also important, like around the complexity of the organization, that you also, create an understanding of how many levels of access that you have as part of your control structure. And so, in most of these audits, because people left the firm or changed jobs, I would say 60, 70% of the time, there was always a finding that the business was not managing their access controls effectively. And that's because they had the system, they had a process, but they didn't always understand what those controls really were. So in addition to having a process, you also have to make sure that you build in an understanding of what those systems and access privileges really open to.
And Jeff, aren't these types of controls called out by regulations that financial and healthcare organizations are under?
You have Sarbanes, you have HIPAA. Everybody is on the bandwagon, and if you don't have them, like I said, you're going to pay tremendous fines. But what I'd like to add to what Kevin was saying, this isn't just fraud. If you have the wrong people in the wrong place, you have tremendous chances of unintentional errors going on. People fumbling with software that they shouldn't be touching, not knowing what they're doing, and that's gonna cause you many problems also. Problems not only that could damage your business, you could wind up with regulatory fines on top of that also.
So, Garrett, being the certified hacker, do you think the state of identity management leads to hacks?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like everyone else in the room, I have the cyber kill chain on my wall. Okay. And it basically states what, right? Cameron, don't you have that, written down? Cyber kill chain.
Yeah, it's in the other room. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the other room. It's right there, right? But a cyber kill chain basically says what it was something that released about 20 years ago by the Lockheed Martin consulting group, consulting group for security. And they said, this is what hackers usually are doing. Now, obviously, hackers are allowed and will do whatever they want to do, but it helps us, the white hats, to identify where our vulnerabilities are. And then what we're able to do is create controls, and that's the definition of controls, y'all. The controls to help mitigate the efforts by those hackers. So let's go through it. A hacker, what does it do? It starts with reconnaissance. It's looking at your enterprise, right? Then it's getting an intrusion, okay? It's throwing something on there. I don't care. It's usually phishing, whatever. The main thing to recognize is the Verizon data breach report states that over 60% of your hacks have to do with identity. Because look what they're doing. They're intrusion, they get a phishing, they get some way onto someone's machine. And then what they do is that's an exploitation that gets in there that's attacking some known CFE, which is, CVE, which is, a known vulnerability. Then the fun starts. They're on a machine. Most of the time, they're on a machine that doesn't really matter, okay? They're on some, low-level admin or some user. So what? The first thing they're doing is doing a privilege escalation, right? Now, they're from that low-level users. Like if you go on the hacker websites, right? You can buy users at all these enterprise for pennies on the dollar. The ones that are admin accounts cost $20 to $500. So hackers are efficient like everyone else. They get a low-level password, then they do a privilege escalation. This is where identity really becomes important, right? Because what did they do? They got on our systems as some type of user, okay? Some type of user. Now, if we're sloppy with our identity management, as Jeff and Kevin were saying, right? They're good enough. They're doing the next step. They're lateral movement across your enterprise, okay? They're finding the targets that really matter, right? That's why what we have to do with our identities is we have to lock them down to the principle of least privilege. That is the concept. Yeah, they say, always happy when I get the smart guys like Jeff and Kevin and Cameron to say yes, right? So Jeff, the principle of least privilege is what? It's a concept that know your user's permissions. Know your
Only what
user's
they
permissions.
need.
Right.
Only what they need. They can't have anything else. That's
Right.
it.
And this is not just five guys just talking. This is the Stop Ransomware guide calls out, and the Stop Ransomware, the principle of least privilege. And the concept is we've got to start knowing what our identities and what privileges they have. What was it? Palo Alto did a great survey of permissions, completely apropos to this. So it was done last year. They surveyed like 1,800 of their customers and asked them, and if they knew the cloud permissions, real in-depth questions about cloud permissions. What was the percentage that the companies had that actually locked down? 1%. 99% of the companies said overly permissioned admin rates up at the cloud. So that's where we're at.
But I was just going to say, I think the key thing here for those that are listening to this webinar is how easy YouAttest fits into your platform. They go right into Okta, right into Microsoft, and literally within days, you could have this process working. And so what I love about YouAttest is the simplicity of how it works and how easy it is to integrate. And having, brought in many outside services, having had information security as part of my risk team for couple of different places. Like this is something that once you say, hey, I want to do this, it's not going to take months and months to get the software integrated and then train everybody and all this stuff. This is a really straightforward, simple solution that works great, particularly for the companies that I work with, very small companies that don't want to spend, tens of thousands of dollars on an enterprise solution because the enterprise is 50 people. So this is a very, very good solution for an early stage fintech company.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
I want to add to that, and once it's integrated, it's instantaneous. You can do it whenever you want, get a report on the fly, and you don't have to look at the whole company if you don't want. You can look at a division, you can look at a section, you can look at one manager's group. Am I correct, Garret?
100%, 100%. We are executing on that phrase, which most identity people just try to put like this. And as Cameron stated, the MSPs are in the same boat, which is identity governance. I said it. That was that real ugly world, right, Cameron? Is MSPs and most organizations are pretty good at IAM. And that's why we built, as Kevin keeps pointing out in a good way, that's why we built our identity governance product off of the fantastic products out there for IAM. I'm talking to Zero ID, I'm talking to Ping, I'm talking Jump Cloud, I'm talking Okta. Those products are really good. But my analogy of this, and this might hurt you guys' brains, but maybe I watched World at War too much growing up. My analogy of IAM and IGA is this, is that think 1950s cars, right? Those big, boats of things. And my family's Midwesterners, so we had a lot of those kind of cars in the parking lot. The engines were amazing. That's IAM. We're really good. And Kevin and Jeff, you guys can attest, we're really good at giving access to applications and resources, to PHI, PII, CUI. We're really good at that, right? We're not so good at, same thing in the 50s. They had those wonderful World War II engines in those things. They had really shitty brakes, okay? That's identity governance. Who, after 3 months, 6 months, 1 year of an application be out there, who has access to that application, right? That's why Palo Alto says 99% don't have any idea, because we keep adding users, we keep adding permissions. It's called privilege creep. How do we implement the principle of least privilege? How do we pull back all those access rights? That's what we worked 2.5 years and I did 2 million of these attestations at YouAttest to figure out how we quantify what we've given access to, quantify whatever by the people that actually know, the managers. And I like what Kevin said, doesn't matter whether it's 50 users or it's literally, we have one we're doing with 950,000 roles. The product automates that process. Yeah, take it away.
Perfect. So Jeffrey, being the certified fraud examiner, have you seen that the sloppy state of identity has led to fraud? And if so, what kind?
Oh, constantly. I've been on ACFE conventions where we have fraudsters coming in who were able to actually take the money, process journal entries, and cover up every track of what they were doing without anybody knowing it. These companies were not watching they don't watch their shops. I know that in the last couple of years, Facebook has had problems, Boeing has problems, SunTrust. I had one case I worked on in a healthcare organization where one of the controllers, who should have had no access to payroll, was actually performing the greatest fraud I've ever dealt with. They were taking pennies off of everyone's federal and state tax deductions and adding them to their own accounts, so that when they got their W-2, they got tremendous refunds.
Wow.
Controller never should have had access to payroll. Had nothing to do with payroll. I mean, these are the kind of things that can be done. Once you're in there, it's just, if you could think of it, you could probably do it.
And Cameron, so once again, being on the side of the managed service providers, shouldn't they be helping in identity security and identity compliance? And are they?
Two very different questions. Should they be? Generally, they think they should be to XYZ extent for whatever maybe package they sold. But then when something goes wrong, then the end users feel like they're the ones that are 100% responsible. So this really evolving industry of, I mean, there's cyber insurance now. That didn't really used to be much of a thing. And that is just, I mean, everyone here can talk about cyber insurance for a long time. I mean, it's just,
and it's
a mess of an evolution. And so when you're dealing with like the MSPs, they have this mantra where people are supported and devices are managed. That's how people do their licensing. That's how they do their, engagements with end users. And they go, we support the people and we manage the devices. But where does identity really fall under there? Because that would be more of managing the people's roles and responsibilities, where the MSPs don't really necessarily feel like it's their responsibility to go, I'm going to go talk to every manager and say, what are all the permissions that somebody should have? Because that onus is really on the company itself. So as far as like, should they be doing it? The way that I would, if I was talking to CEOs of MSPs, trying to say, you need to expand your services, and here's why. Because ultimately, there's a million services, there's a million pieces of software, there's a million things that everybody wants somebody else to spend. But where's the real benefit? So for MSPs, you're dealing with this onboarding sense. And so when you onboard a client, you need to think of it as you're doing your own onboarding instead of when you're onboarding an employee. So you're the end user and you're going, okay, we're onboarding an employee. That's great. But as Garret and everybody else here is talking about, there's no life cycle. It's going, okay, we onboarded them and then we have some sort of offboarding. But what happened in between here and there? Did they have, individual admin rights? Did they, download some, shadow software? There's this big problem of how do you maintain that and who's responsible? Because if it's the end users haven't historically been doing it, then these MSPs should view it as this is an opportunity to get deeper into your client. Because generally speaking, if you have 100-person company and they have some sort of MSP already doing something, it's in a section or a division or just manages their Microsoft licensing and a little bit of break fix or something. It's generally a small input. It's not just we outsource everything IT strategy, IT governance, identity management, et cetera, et cetera. So for MSPs, I'm telling them that this is an opportunity for you to do the discovery, for you to go, run toward what you don't know and go, we really want to know your entire environment. But if you're not hiring us for that, then it's kind of this push-pull of, well, when you get hacked, it's not really our problem. That's not the right kind of business relationship. If you're trying to be an MSP and you're trying to be that advisor and you're trying to get more and more business from your client, then you need to really walk them through the advantages of watching for their security and where's the value add to their team and their end users and just the overall integrity of their business.
Cameron, as you said before, but won't cybersecurity insurance actually push on this? Everybody's going to need us. Nobody's going to be able to pay their premiums without us. Because once the cybersecurity insurance companies get smart and say, we can protect against this, the MSPs are going to have it, or their competition is going to have it. And once their competition has it, they're out of business. Like I said, our program is the foundation. It's the gatekeeper to keeping your organization cleansed so that you know who's in it and what they're doing. If the MSPs don't have this process, I think like I said, they're going to get eliminated by their competition who has it.
Yeah.
And Jeff and Kevin, don't you think the insurance companies are going to have some mandates around these controls?
Well, I was just going to say that thinking that you could outsource this through some kind of MSP or whatever would be in complete contrast to banking and financial regulatory guidance, because the basic principle of third-party or vendor management is that you have to treat third parties as if it's you, and you're responsible for everything that they do. So I think it's fine to be able to bring in a third party that has capabilities that you need, like a solution like YouAttest. But to think that you could just completely outsource the responsibility for identity management,
Good point.
that would be, in my opinion, out of compliance with what the regulatory guidance suggests you need to do. So I think really we have to have the right business model. Companies have to have the right business model. And it's fine to go to companies like YouAttest or even managed service providers for capabilities. But ultimately, it's your responsibility to have the controls and protect your organization, your investors, your customers. And so I think that's got to be the guiding principle in any kind of relationship or in the structure of any kind of relationship that you put in place.
Kevin, but don't you believe that the MSPs using our program would be able to provide all the reports necessary back to the people utilizing them so they can track what is happening in their organization without having to go in and do all this work themselves? A simple report on a daily basis. Who was added, who was deleted, who escalated, who changed programs. That's what I need every day, and I have to review that in my organization, but I don't want to have to go do it. I just want to get an email with a report delivered telling me what changed in access and privilege in my company. And that, I think, would take care of everything you're talking about. I'm not asking them to be the decision maker. I'm asking them to provide the data.
Yeah, and that is exactly in line with what I said, which is ultimately the company's taking responsibility, but a service provider is providing the capability to identify where change has occurred. And I think that's fine, but ultimately they're not relying on the service provider to take the actions that they need to take internally on that information.
That's a really good point. So when you're talking about a big bank, their IT staff is larger than general MSSPs anyway. So to be able to outsource the identity management to that group, like that's not really the purpose.
It's not realistic.
Right? Yeah, when you have a large organization, absolutely, it's like you need to have your own champions. You have your own CISO. But for companies that are less than 100 or 200 people, and they're leaning on their MSPs, and that's where I think what's kind of catching up with this industry, and that's the thing. I mean, we always start seeing changes, and then companies and business leaders start making decisions, and then they kind of catch up. In this sense, a really big thing that Silvereye does is we do a lot of matchmaking, because there's a lot of end users that are not matched with the right MSP or MSSP. And with this big consolidation, you're going, okay, if you are, say, a regional bank, and you're going, we have some staff which can help manage and champion and maybe have the ultra admin, but ultimately we need to bring in these kinds of advisors. And that's where we're starting to see MSSPs that are going around and gobbling up MSPs that have clients maybe in the, some MSPs go, we only support dentist offices. I tell them, you really need to get out of that business. It's a terrible idea, but that's not the point. The point is that there are MSSPs who go, we can provide security to dentist offices because we do all the HIPAA compliance, we do all of this stuff. So we're going to go and gobble up those clients. And now we can add these additional services on top, where that's kind of what we're seeing as far as we need the MSP and MSSP market to really continue to grow and consolidate, so that you have these vertically focused security providers, so that when you have a regional bank, or you have a large school, or you have a consolidation of hospitals, that there are providers that can actually step in and go, we can help you identify this stuff, but we can also give you a lot of advice, because when there's one big event, one large fraudster or something, or makes the news, you need to bring in some really big companies to unpack all of that, and then start from the ground up, going, we're going to re-onboard everybody. And that's where the industry is catching up. So the end users, it's like the sooner you find people that are going to be champions for that, the sooner you're going to be protected before it's a little too late.
Cameron,
But-
would you say that most MSPs have been on the defense, and now in order to grow, they need to defend and report?
Ooh, that's a good question. Generally speaking, so MSPs have a real hard time getting clients because you're letting them into your systems, and it's a very hard acquisition. So generally speaking, they grow from referrals. So they're going, okay, we have this referral, but for their ability to grow, they need to kind of have some sort of reason to improve. But if they don't know what's going on, then how do you know to cross-sell services? I mean, anybody who's done big game hunting with federal government agencies for large ELAs understands that you got to go and figure out where all the environments and all the use cases and all the, everybody's using different things, different places, et cetera, et cetera. But for MSPs, using a discovery tool to go, hey, we're going to use this discovery tool because quite frankly, yes, it's helpful. The end users can finally go, oh, we feel like we have our arms around what's going on. Maybe it's a big mess, but at least we could put our arms around it. Now the MSP goes, wow, look at all of this potential. Cross-selling, upselling, advising. Like now that we have the whole discovery, have the whole books. I mean, if you go to a company and they say, here's access to our books and our CRM and our ERP, I could find a lot of things to sell them. And that's kind of the way that we're working with MSPs here, going, this is not just a foot in the door. This is, you get an opportunity to look through the entire environment, and then start matching it with what your services are.
But I would contest, and maybe it's just because I've been in financial services virtually my whole career, that there still needs, like, part of making this successful for every type of company, there still needs to be somebody on the inside of that company that takes responsibility for all the information that gets shared, whether it's daily, weekly, whatever it is. And so you can't, no company can outsource the responsibility for protecting their customers, protecting their employees, protecting their investors. And so even if you buy an identity in a box solution that offers to do everything for you, there still needs to be somebody on the inside who's accountable for this. So I would never, in any of my companies that I work with, say, hey, YouAttest does it all for you, or whatever. It might give you the technical capability to give you all the reporting and understanding, but somebody's still got to be accountable for understanding, using that information, and figuring out what to do with it.
So Garret, how can YouAttest help with this lack of expertise at the enterprise and the MSP level?
I love the exchange between Kevin and Jeff. That was amazing. And thank you guys both for your years of experience to be able to say that. Whereas it was Kevin saying, hey, come on, the organization's got to own this, right? Kevin, they got to own it, right?
It's their risk. And
right.
You can't outsource the responsibility for risk management. Okay.
Agreed. But Jeff, who is very close to the product, take it away, Jeff.
They have to own it, but they don't have to do it. I really believe
that's
the way to do this is to have someone do the process for me, report to me so I can see what's going on. I don't want to hire 5 people to do something that I'm only doing every 3 months, or I'm only doing on a quarterly basis, annually. I want to be able to go out to someone and say, I need a snapshot of what's going on in my identity governance and administration as of today. And I want to see the report and I want to work with it. But I don't want to run it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to have to worry about the integration.
I understand. We're saying the same thing, Jeff.
We're saying the exact same thing. That's what I love.
We are.
That's what I love. Yeah.
But
I'm going to get rid of the 200 webinars I've done and just use this 3 minutes, right?
Right.
Which is basically YouAttest is simply replacing the abacus. Right? We used to add numbers with abacuses. No, it is a tool that automates the process of attestation. No spreadsheets, no emails. It automates that for the person Kevin identifies as the risk manager in the organization, can run the YouAttest process to determine let's get that number up from we only know 1% of our permissions up to 99%. That's what YouAttest is. The risk manager at the company owns the process, and brings in Cameron's people. The MSP can manage this tool for them, so those reports and information go back to that risk manager.
And let me just say one other thing. Like, this is what we're really talking about is, hey, there was a change that happened today. Tomorrow, I'm a person who's accountable for assessing whether that change looks right. For the quarterly process, that's managers' responsibilities. Like, to me, like, part of being a manager is being responsible for the people on your team. So when I had to do this at a very large company, I had 11 direct reports, and this report pages would come to me, and I knew very little about what all those systems were that they had access to. So I would sit down with my people and say, hey, what is this? Do you really need that? Okay, like, explain to me what this is. And so my point is that you can't replace, even with this, you still need to have management diligence around making sure that all the access privileges are needed and are only for the role that they play in the company. Nobody can outsource that responsibility.
Tell them, Garret, that's exactly what YouAttest does. It pulls it down to those managers to review their people and decide if they belong there and if they have rights to what zero trust.
Yeah. And as a risk manager that I work with out of Texas on the call, I'll call you out, Paul Feather says it's about automation. And that's what it is. And that's the tool that we created, that we originally did for the enterprises. But now we see that so many people are going in a good way over to managed services. We have an offering for the MSPs.
Yep.
Take it away, Ashley.
So, Jeffrey, what direction should these enterprises take to improve their identity and access environments, as well as eliminate fraud?
Why don't they call me and I'll start them on the right track?
Absolutely.
I love it.
Good call, Jeff.
And Cameron, how do you see the managed services world? So what changes should they be looking for to aid against fraud and other IT mischief?
For the masses, so because there are so many different types of MSPs, and they all have different kinds of clients, I think the real piece for MSPs that differentiates from a general reseller is the fact that they are an IT advisor. So for them to go, listen, we don't have to know everything. We don't have to be experts in everything. A, you have to really understand that and you have to own that. And B is, it doesn't mean that you can't add a lot of value in a realm that they don't have a lot of expertise in, such as, again, security, identity management. They can still do a large scale discovery. They can still partner with other companies. A lot of our MSPs, what they do is they go, we only do backup and recovery, endpoint protection, and break fix for some printers and Windows issues. But we have clients who want other things. And what we do is we partner with larger MSSPs to go, hey, we need you to come in here and do an audit because they came to us. They don't want to say no. I mean, you're so sweet. Everyone just loves you. So that's really, it's when you're dealing with an MSP, as we were talking earlier, is they're going to get their lunch eaten. And they know that. It's hard enough for them to get new clients. So they definitely don't want to say no when a client asks for something new. And that's where the partnership and the consolidation and just even the white labeling of other services. So just because you picked your swim lane doesn't mean that you shouldn't partner with other companies that work in IT auditing or identity management or enterprise deployments, et cetera, because your clients are going to ask for that. And that's a big part of what we do too, is it's a lot of this channel management going. We want to pair the end users and the requirements with the right people.
Cameron, why would I go to an MSP or an MSSP that can't do what YouAttest does when I'm telling you that I believe it's the gatekeeper? What good is all that other work if you have ghost accounts, you have privilege creep? What good is all that? What am I paying for? Don't you have to
Well,
cleanse the organization first before you give all those other benefits?
I mean, I would, and that's really that's the onus of the MSP going, are you going to just sell your package? Because there's always this evolution of MSPs too. Everyone starts and goes, we'll take anything from anybody, and then they grow and they go, okay, now we're going to do a stack. Okay, now we're going to offer this added service. So talking to MSPs as a whole, like it's a big spectrum of companies that are all relatively small and they have these strange kind of partnerships. But absolutely, I mean, there's nothing more important than onboarding. And
So shouldn't they all call us and use us as an add-on to all the services that they're already giving out?
And again, when you're talking to an MSP and saying, we want you to use something new, what's the value? Is it going in my stack? Am I reselling it every month? Or what am I using it for? And here's, I think the biggest piece with MSPs is a lot of them, they don't charge for onboarding. They just view it as, we're going to give you God knows how many hours just because we're so excited to get a client, which is, that's an MSP that's less than 20 or 30 people who, it's hard to value their time because they're so desperate for new clients. But in this sense, you're going, here's a way to charge somebody for onboarding and offer them a real deliverable. Because if somebody comes into my organization and goes, onboarding is $2,000, $5,000, whatever it is, but at the end, yes, maybe I'm going, I just want this package or I just want these things, but at least I know what mess I'm dealing with because I'm a business owner. I understand there's creep on everything. It's not just, it's not just privilege for users. It's everything. Everything creeps. So that's where, there are the companies like YouAttest going, we want to at least go and shine the light on the trouble. And that's where these, people like Kevin, like there's a reason why he rose up the ladders because he's there going, I'm here to take accountability and my people are going to take accountability and their people are going to take accountability. When you work with an organization like that, getting them to shine a light on all the issues is not a problem. The issue that I'm talking about is all the MSP end users who go, we're a community college and we got, 4 people and we're at our max. We have to outsource our stuff because we just don't have the bandwidth. There's always more IT projects to work on.
Yeah, and I see nothing wrong with acquiring through an MSP or any other way the service, the capabilities that you need. But managing risk is everybody's responsibility inside a firm, and that's where I think banks who live in a highly regulated world over the years coming out of the great financial crisis, the banks have learned that people do what you incent them to do, and everybody in a large bank has compliance and risk objectives that could end up in everything from eliminating a bonus or being terminated if you don't follow the basic controls and processes that you need to operate effectively. And I think that's exactly whether it's a stick or a carrot, it's important for everybody to understand that it's everybody's responsibility to manage risk. And identity risk is one of those blocking and tackling capabilities that YouAttest provides a great solution for, but it's got to be the employee's responsibility to make sure that this is managed the right way.
Perfect. So we have a bunch of questions that came in along the way. So I'm going to go through those and feel free to add some more questions to the chat on the channel. So the first one that I have, how do executives like me get the cost over the finish line? So what is the business case? ROI, as the general counsel, privacy, and cybersecurity professional, I can't always be saying it's dangerous. You should be afraid. Our company will die without it. So Kevin, let's start with you. What's your answer to that?
Well, one of the things that I really like about YouAttest is it's not that expensive for the value that it brings to the organization. So the question is, I'd answer the question back and say, what would your company be worth if you had like a breach resulting from identity management? And the answer is not very much. And because if customers lose confidence in your ability to protect their information, you don't really have much of a company left. So I look at this as, I hate to use the word blocking and tackling, but this is a basic control that works really well, that's really reasonable compared to other enterprise solutions that I've seen, that fits really well, particularly for small companies, in my view, that plugs in really easily and gives you the protection you need against that risk. So the way to think about this is, maybe there's a low probability that something will happen, but when it happens, it has a high exposure to loss. And so you're trying to manage against the risk that something might be in the tails of happening, but when it happens, it's a disaster. And so YouAttest is like, do you have life insurance? You don't plan on dying, but at some point it's going to happen. And you hope that the people you leave behind are in a good financial place. That's why you have life insurance. Consider this like the life insurance against identity risk.
Can I
I
add
love
to
that.
Ashley, can I add to that?
Yep,
tell
I was
that
just going to ask you.
I would tell that gentleman or that gentlewoman to add it to your annual budget. Find a line for it in your annual budget. Don't start asking for it in the middle of the year. Don't start trying to put out fires. It should be part of your annual program.
Yep, absolutely.
I'll jump in with a little less doom and gloom, even though it's very my style. But what I like about this product specifically is that it's a discovery tool. You don't know what you're getting into. So there's a lot of value in obviously the life cycle and going, oh, we can use this every quarter or every 6 months or every year or every month, just, you know, depending on what verticals you fall under, et cetera, et cetera. But this is one of those things where if you try it one time, you suddenly go, oh, now I can prioritize what my real issues are, because it's tough to go, you run this tool and then you put some people on it, they change some permissions, and suddenly you're protected, because you never know what's going to change tomorrow, what's going to happen, and where the real vulnerability that's going to cause the quake to actually happen. But here, it at least allows you to go, now I know where the problems are, and I can choose to fix one of them, all of them, this section, this division. I can prioritize. If you're right now, it's like you don't know. A lot of people, they make their buying decisions going, we have this use case, and you know, did somebody just threaten the CISO 1,000 times until they felt like they had to do X, Y, Z? I mean, that's one way of selling. I certainly see people do it, but here it's more of a, you don't even know, we don't know what we're getting into. You don't know what you're getting into. So let's just take a look. We can, if you open it up and it's ugly or it's pretty and you want to close it and put it back away, that's okay. You know the value right after you use it. You know the ongoing value after you use it, because it's tough when you're talking enterprise. When you're talking, having done a lot of very big, enterprise license agreements with the federal governments, it never starts off as 25,000 users. It just doesn't happen. That's not realistic. You have to go, let's try this on a use case where we think there's something. You do the discovery tool and you go, you know what? We found more than we thought we were going to. Now the value builds. So that's the kind of thing where when you get in, you see the value and you suddenly gain control over, am I getting a big bang for my buck with this? Do I want to do it more often? Do I want to spread it out? A lot of tools aren't like that. So that's what I love about this, is you're learning so much. So even if just trying it once, you can go, wow, I learned a whole bunch. And if you want to look the other way, that's your prerogative. You just got bad leadership there.
Yeah. And like, reason why I like this for small firms is startups have such high turnover. People are in one job 1 week, they're in the next job the following week, they wear multiple hats, and people are moving so fast that they're not thinking about the infrastructural controls that they need. And then when you step back a year later, maybe even less, and then you do something like this and you say, oh my God, I didn't realize what I created here. Like, and 50% of your workforce is turned over in a year. Like, it's very eye-opening to see. And so, that's why people are not thinking about it, because they're only thinking about moving fast. And when you move too fast, you forget about some of the basic controls that you need to have in place.
The other thing I think that's important also, and tell me if I'm right, Garrett, is once we do the YouAttest snapshot, depending on how the cost doesn't escalate with how deep you want to dig.
No, I like that. I like that. And that's what it is. Ashley is our customer service manager. She can tell you how many roles some of the customers have. What is some of them have, Ashley?
I mean, one of them is almost 900,000 in 29 different countries.
And
Like
the individual users, you had some number, how many roles they had.
10,000 individual users, but yeah, up to almost 1 million roles.
Yeah, so
So-
do the math. And some of the users had some like 2,000 roles.
Mhm.
So into the answer the group, how the hell do you attest to that manually, right? You need a
You don't.
process that does, as Cameron says, love it, the discovery of the roles, and then discover the roles, automate the process, create the evidence of the work. That's what it does. Now the humans at the enterprise, they're the ones involving, and the manager is saying, that's a good role, or I have no idea that role, and he delegates to someone else. The YouAttest product automates all that and allows a quantified way. And yeah, I do believe, since everyone's moving to MSPs, that the MSPs should run this and be the guys that offer this as a service, but pushing back on the managers themselves to do the attestations. Yes.
Okay, next question I have. So for fintech that have bank partnerships, are you seeing these requirements coming from the FDIC banks? I'm going to start with Kevin.
So there's been a couple of consent orders that have come out for Cross River, and the other one that's in West Virginia, I'm just drawing a blank on. And basically what regulators are trying to do is fintechs use sponsor banks to try to export a banking charter so they can have like consistent product structure versus like state licensing. But technically the loans are originated by the bank and then ultimately bought by the fintech. The issue is that, so Cross River Bank had, I think it was a 34-page consent order. And a lot of it is about holding Cross River Bank responsible for compliance and third-party risk management of their fintech partners. And so this is an example. It's not at the top of their list. Things like fair lending, compliance with basic regulations, like things like UDAP, which is unfair deceptive practices and abusive practices. So this is definitely something that whether it's under Sarbanes-Oxley or under compliance for identity controls, like this is definitely something that the FDIC and other regulators would expect regulated financial institutions to have in place. And in sponsor banks, they're holding them responsible for holding their fintech partners to the same standards that they should hold themselves to. So this is, I like to talk in baseball terms, we're still in the early innings on this because other sponsor banks are likely going to have the same issues. But Cross River, I think because they're particularly big in the credit card space, that's one that I think everybody is now reading, and every sponsor bank is stepping up their fair lending responsibilities.
Perfect. So lastly, guests, please tell us how people can get a hold of you. So Kevin, I'll start with you.
Here's my email, kmoss2005@msn.com. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jeffrey?
My phone number, 212-222-0189, and my email address at YouAttest.
And Cameron?
You can email me at cameron@silvereyetech.com or just drop me a line on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And then YouAttest is at youattest.com and can be reached at info@youattest.com. So thank you, panelists. I really appreciate you guys coming today, and thank you to the audience for attending this. Hopefully we'll do some more in the future.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Great
Take care,
discussion.
everybody. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everyone. Thanks again.